speaking on the cuff. They can have thoughts in their head and it comes out of their mouth in a wonderful presentation without notes. I'm not one of those people. Never have been, never will be, so I'm sorry, but I am going to read my Drash from paper. Perhaps some of you have heard the old joke about the man, let's call him Saul, who regularly goes to the synagogue for services. A skeptic asks him, do you really talk to God? And Saul answers, no, but my pal Sam comes to talk to God, and I come to talk to Sam. And some of you may have shared my childhood experience of attending high holiday services and everyone being yelled at by the rabbi for not coming to synagogue the rest of the year. And as a kid, it never made sense to me why the rabbi would, A, try to make us feel bad, and B, do it when he finally had us all there, which is what he said he wanted. There is an old school logic to this. I can kind of see that now, but it was certainly counterproductive. This was classical Reform Judaism at its not best. These days, we have as many reasons as there are congregants to come to synagogue, and this is a blessing. One constant reason for attending is our search for solace, especially since October 7th. We are subjected every day to bad news, scary news, and just too much information of the worst kind. Along these lines, I subscribe to the weekly podcast, America at the Crossroads. Do any of you do that as well? It's run out of Los Angeles, and it's a Jewish organization podcast. They have wonderful, wonderful speakers on it. America at the Crossroads, you can find it. This past Monday, there was an extra session due to the bombings between Iran and Israel, with Dennis Ross as the guest speaker. In discussing the politics of the region, he said something that really resonated with me, and I'll paraphrase. Ross maintains that Israel's neighboring countries don't understand the Chevruta, the community in which Israelis live. Despite a majority of Israelis feeling contempt and anger with its current leadership, they will nonetheless show up to support each other in any conflict. He thinks 80% of Israelis are behind the government's current action against Iran, and that they will endure the bombings, the fear, and the likelihood of being called up for service, again, to support each other. This community that's being present for their fellow Israelis, no matter how they view the government, Ross said, is what the surrounding nations can't comprehend. Israelis know that their present and future depend upon this bond of community, despite how the current government behaves. In a novel I just finished, the protagonist says several times to be very wary of little people with a little power. In this week's Torah portion, Korach and others attempt a power grab from Moses and Aaron. Mind you, Korach was already part of the leadership structure because he was both a Levite and a cousin of Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. But apparently this wasn't enough for him. Were his actions the consequence of blind ego or a desperate urge for attention? Was he jealous? Were his duties and place in the hierarchy not enough? What if, though, Korach felt unseen and unheard despite his status? He was a somewhat little person in the grand scheme of things, with a little power. Maybe he was desperate and unmoored, wandering in that endless desert with no foreseeable conclusion to the journey. Maybe he was lonely, despite being part of a tribe, and had no understanding that his isolation could be solved in other ways. Maybe he was insecure. And maybe he was just arrogant. And of course, Korach had none of the history, suffering, or understanding that Moses, Aaron, and Miriam had endured and from which they had learned and grown. It wasn't enough to Korach that he could be part of the larger community, witness the rites, and be present for the miracles. Perhaps he asked himself, what's so special about Moses and Aaron? I can do this. We're all equal before God, aren't we? When the Torah mentions Moses talking to God panim al panim, face to face, it is fascinating to me that the Hebrew word for face is in the plural, panim. We all have more than one face, after all, each one expressing an emotion or lack thereof, or conveying the relationship to the person in front of that face. This Hebrew phrase also has an interesting correlation to the expression loss of face. The vengeance and humiliation of someone who has lost face can be wildly out of proportion to the actual event. When someone is behaving in a way that we find to be either unjustifiable or inexplicable, it is helpful to try to find out what the backstory is. When I first started out at Temple Israel in 2001, the senior rabbi had already been there for a decade. And I was a newbie, and I would see people do or say or exhibit something that I felt was to be a little odd. So I'd go into his office and say, okay, what do I need to understand about this person? And there's always a backstory, which helps you diffuse the situation, or at least understand it better. As we know, Moses never enters the Promised Land, which I find both brilliant and sad. Brilliant because we were never supposed to worship another human, only God. As humans, we would have been all too apt to start praying either to the cult of Moses or to someone else who had a little power. And of course, God sought retribution for the failings of leadership and belief that Moses himself displayed. And it's sad because, well, look what Moses went through. And his reward is one of knowing that he obeyed God and fulfilled his duty. There is no physical reward at the end of his journey. He doesn't get to lay down his burden in the shade of a fig tree. At the close of Deuteronomy, we are told, never again did there arise in Israel a prophet like Moses, whom God singled out face to face for the various signs and portents that God sent him to display in the land of Egypt against Pharaoh and all his courtiers and his whole country, and for all the great might and awesome power that Moses displayed before all Israel. We don't, none of us, and never will, have the power and burden that Moses had in his privileged, lonely, and exhausting relationship with God. This is as it should be, and we have other options. We pray together because we are a tribal faith. Jews are not solo practitioners of religion. We have neither a history nor a custom of being cloistered. We have requirements for a minyan because we are supposed to be here for each other. Our ancestors were so wise, knowing that mourners need to be with at least 9 others to say Kaddish, to have friends surround them, and to not cry alone. And all of us need to be seen, to be heard, and to have human contact. Many Israelis may be highly secular, but synagogue attendance notwithstanding, they are certainly present for each other. Our fictitious synagogue attendee, Saul, doesn't go to services to talk to God, and may in fact think religion is an outdated holdover from superstitious times. Nonetheless, while he's waiting to speak with his pal Sam, he is in community. He hears the prayers, he hears the music, and he is with friends. I will bet that most of you do some kind of volunteering in San Francisco, or donate money, or go to rallies, or help with a family member. This is all part of being in the kahal in the larger sense. We might not know why the person sitting next to us or in front of us came to these services tonight, but I know that having you nearby, singing, reading, and then schmoozing in the yoneg, or just greeting them on the way in and wishing them Shabbat Shalom, this makes a difference. We all make a difference simply by showing up, whether we are prayer adjacent or prayer involved. We are all here together. We continue on page 282 with Elenu, and we rise.